August 14, 2002, Washington, D.C. The summer heat bakes the streets outside a nondescript press conference room. Inside, a spokesperson for an Iranian opposition group steps up to a microphone. There are no explosions, no soldiers, no covert operatives rappelling down embassy walls, just a man, a podium, and a set of satellite photographs that are about to shake the entire world. In a matter of minutes, that spokesperson announces to a stunned room of journalists and diplomats that Iran, a nation that had publicly insisted its nuclear activities were peaceful, had been secretly constructing not one, but two massive nuclear facilities. One was buried deep in the desert near a small city called Natanz, roughly 100 miles north of Isfahan. The other sat near the industrial city of Arak in central Iran, about 150 miles south of Tehran. Neither had ever been declared to the International Atomic Energy Agency. Neither had ever appeared on any official Iranian nuclear disclosure. Iran had been building them in secret for years, and the world had no idea until that moment. This is the story of how Iran's hidden nuclear program was dragged into the open. It is a story about exiles, intelligence, buried secrets, and the terrifying question of what happens when a regime decides it wants the most dangerous weapon ever created, and almost gets away with hiding it. To understand what August 2002 meant, you have to understand how long Iran had been hiding. Iran's nuclear program stretched back decades, originally built with American assistance under the Shah in the 1970s. But after the Islamic Revolution of 1979, everything changed. The new clerical government inherited the program, mothballed parts of it, then quietly, methodically, began expanding it again in the 1980s and 1990s, this time in secret and outside the scrutiny of international inspectors. Iran was a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. That meant it had legal obligations to declare its nuclear sites to the IAEA and allow inspections. The regime declared what it wanted the world to see: the Bushehr nuclear power plant, which was the regime's public face of its peaceful nuclear energy program. But behind that public face, deep in the desert and hidden from satellites and inspectors, Iran was building something far more dangerous. The Natanz facility was designed to house thousands of centrifuges, machines that spin uranium gas at extraordinary speeds to concentrate its fissile isotopes, a process called enrichment. Enough enriched uranium and you have fuel for a reactor. Enrich it further, to weapons grade, and you have the core of a nuclear bomb. The Arak facility was designed to produce heavy water, a material critical for a different path to nuclear weapons, one that produces plutonium as a byproduct. Two different pathways, two hidden facilities, one terrifying destination, and the world was watching none of it. The group that blew the secret open was the National Council of Resistance of Iran, the NCRI, and its principal component, the People's Mojahedin Organization of Iran, known by the Persian acronym MEK. These were not ordinary political dissidents. The MEK had a violent and complicated history, having fought against both the Shah and the Islamic Republic. They were headquartered largely in Europe and Iraq, and they maintained a network of sources inside Iran, members, sympathizers, and contacts embedded within the country's institutions, industries, and even its military apparatus. The United States had listed the MEK as a foreign terrorist organization in 1997, a designation that would not be lifted until 2012. This created a peculiar and deeply uncomfortable reality at the heart of the 2002 revelation. The group exposing Iran's nuclear secrets was simultaneously blacklisted by the very government whose intelligence community had been building its own picture of those same secrets. The information was real. The messenger was radioactive. But here's the question every intelligence professional in Washington was asking that August. How did a group of exiled Iranian dissidents operating from outside the country obtain precise information about two heavily classified underground construction projects inside a tightly controlled police state? The answer, it turned out, was more complicated than it appeared on the surface. According to reporting by nuclear journalist Mark Hibbs, The United States intelligence community had already been briefing the IAEA on the Natanz site for approximately a year before the NCRI's public announcement. American analysts, working from reconnaissance satellite imagery, intercepted procurement records, and other intelligence, had been steadily building a detailed picture of what Iran was constructing. The CIA's own unclassified report to Congress, covering the first half of 2003, confirmed that it had been tracking Iran's nuclear infrastructure and noted that the August 2002 opposition disclosure had forced the issue into public view. The picture that emerges is one of parallel knowledge. The U.S. knew. American intelligence agencies had been watching Natanz take shape from space, tracking the suspicious procurement of centrifuge components through front companies and intermediaries. But strategic knowledge and public accountability are two very different things. Knowing something in a classified briefing room and forcing a rogue regime to answer for it on the world stage are separated by an enormous political gulf. The NCRI's press conference achieved in one afternoon what years of quiet intelligence accumulation had not. It forced the secret into the open in a way that could not be dismissed, ignored, or buried in a classified annex. The photographs shown at the August 14th press conference depicted the two sites clearly. Natanz showed a large complex with distinctive construction patterns consistent with an industrial-scale enrichment facility. Iraq showed infrastructure consistent with heavy water production. Within days, the commercial satellite imagery company Digital Globe confirmed the sites existed, providing independent verification accessible to anyone willing to look. Iran's first response was denial. The regime dismissed the NCRI as a terrorist organization, a label that was, ironically, technically accurate under U.S. law at the time, and insisted there was nothing to investigate. But by December 2002, independent satellite confirmation had made denial untenable. The United States accused Tehran of an across-the-board pursuit of weapons of mass destruction. Iran, under enormous pressure, agreed to allow IAEA inspections. The inspectors arrived at Natanz in early 2003. What they found stunned them. Iran confirmed to IAEA Director General Mohammad El-Baradei in February 2003 that Natanz was indeed intended to become an industrial-scale centrifuge enrichment facility, capable of producing enough enriched uranium to eventually fuel or arm a nation. And in August 2003, traces of highly enriched weapons-grade uranium were discovered at Natanz. Not reactor-grade, weapons-grade. Think for a moment about the people inside Iran who fed that information out. We do not know their names. We likely never will. They were individuals working within or near Iran's most sensitive industrial projects, passing fragments of information to a network that could assemble those fragments into something coherent and damning. In a country where the intelligence and security services are among the most brutal and paranoid in the world, that kind of information gathering carries a price measured in human lives. The MEK's network inside Iran operated under conditions of extreme danger. Iranian intelligence, the Ministry of Intelligence, known as VIVAC, actively hunted MEK members and sympathizers. People disappeared. People were executed. The information that appeared at that Washington press conference was purchased in part with the safety and freedom of people whose names will never appear in any history book. This is the hidden human cost beneath every intelligence revelation, the faces no one ever sees. Following the initial inspections, the IAEA investigation expanded rapidly. In February 2003, inspectors visited both Natanz and Arak. They found an enrichment facility far more advanced than anything Iran had admitted. They found centrifuge components. They found traces of nuclear material that Iran had never declared. The investigation metastasized. The IAEA Board of Governors, the international body that oversees nuclear compliance worldwide, began deliberating on how to classify what they were finding. By 2005, the IAEA board declared Iran in non-compliance with its Comprehensive Safeguards Agreement, the binding international commitment Iran had made as an NPT signatory. In 2006, the case was referred to the United Nations Security Council, triggering the first of what would become a cascading series of international sanctions against Iran. A regime that had spent years quietly building toward nuclear capability was now the subject of global scrutiny and economic punishment. And if you find yourself wondering whether any of this actually mattered, consider the words of Iran's own former president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, speaking on Iranian state television in February 2008. Asked how the nuclear crisis had begun, he said with visible regret, "This affair started in July 2002. A group from the PMOI came and published some reports about Natanz and Arak and these things. Sensitivity was created, the agency got involved. Then came the Board of Governors resolutions, one after another, one after another." The man who once called for Israel to be wiped off the map was admitting on national television that a group of exiles with photographs had derailed his country's most ambitious secret project. If you are thinking about the strangeness of this moment, a U.S.-designated terrorist organization serving as the instrument of a major U.S. strategic objective, you are thinking correctly. The relationship between American intelligence and the MEK in this period is not simple. It is not a clean story of heroes and villains. The MEK had blood on its hands from decades of violent conflict. Their ideology was a complex mixture of Marxism and Islamism. The U.S. government officially considered them a terrorist group. And yet, the intelligence they surfaced, whether through independent network operations, collaboration with foreign intelligence services including Israeli intelligence, or a combination of both, served Western strategic interests in a way that no official intelligence disclosure could have achieved. President George W. Bush himself later acknowledged that Iran's hidden nuclear program had been discovered not through international inspections, but because, in his words, a dissident group pointed it out to the world. The 2002 revelation did not end Iran's nuclear program. It complicated it, delayed it, constrained it, and brought it into the open, but it did not stop it. Iran continued enriching uranium. It continued building infrastructure. It continued negotiating with international bodies while doing so. The battle over Iran's nuclear program would continue for the next 2 decades through diplomacy, sanctions, the 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, and its eventual collapse, all the way to the present day. But something fundamental changed on August 14, 2002. The fiction of Iran's fully peaceful nuclear program, the story that Tehran had maintained for years before the world, was shattered permanently. Every subsequent negotiation, every sanction, every IAEA resolution, every Security Council vote happened because a group of Iranian exiles walked into a press conference in Washington and said, "We know what you are building, and now the world knows too." If you have stayed with this story this far, it means you care about the hidden architecture of power, the decisions made in secret that shape the world the rest of us live in. If that is the kind of story that matters to you, subscribe, because there are more. And tell us in the comments, do you think the NCRI's disclosure was a genuine act of resistance or a calculated intelligence operation? One answer: no wrong answers. Just your honest read of history. The NCRI was removed from the U.S. terrorism list in 2012, a decade after the revelation that arguably changed the course of nuclear history in the Middle East. The timing is worth noting. The delisting came after years of legal challenges and lobbying, but also after the strategic value of the group's intelligence disclosures had become undeniable. The uncomfortable alliance had produced real results. The world had been warned. The inspectors had found weapons-grade uranium. The Security Council had acted. The story of Natanz is, in the end, a story about the brutal pragmatism at the heart of intelligence. The people who matter in the shadows are often people the official world cannot acknowledge. The information that changes history often comes from places that official history finds inconvenient, and the line between ally and adversary, between asset and liability, is drawn not in principle, but in utility. Iran had spent years building a secret that it believed was impenetrable. A network of exiles, fueled by intelligence that Western agencies had been quietly accumulating, found the crack in that secrecy and drove a truck through it. The centrifuges at Natanz are still spinning today. The nuclear standoff is still unresolved, but the world is watching. And that watching began on a sweltering August afternoon in Washington, when a spokesperson stepped up to a microphone and said, "We know, the secret is over."